Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics and really try to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you. Today, we're diving into something crucial, often kind of overlooked, but it's increasingly vital for pretty much any organization working in our digital-first world, software license compliance audits. Now, you might just think of it as, an IT headache, but we're going to show you why it's actually a business-critical requirement. It hits your bottom line and even your reputation.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is just how pervasive this issue is, and honestly, how easily organizations can find themselves exposed, sometimes without, even realizing it. So our mission today really is to equip you with the essentials, what these software license audits are, why they happen, and crucially, how you can prepare. And even optimize your software use to, well, avoid those costly penalties and the disruption that comes with them.
It's exactly. We'll guide you through some actionable steps, look at common pitfalls, and we've even got a pretty compelling real-world example later on showing how one company saved a significant amount of money just by being proactive. So let's unpack this. Let's make sure you're audit ready.
Okay, so to really get into this, maybe we should start with why. Why has software license compliance become such a hot topic right now? Why does it matter more than ever?
Well, it's essential, first and foremost, to avoid those steep penalties we mentioned, and of course, to protect your organization's reputation. In today's digital-first world, almost every single business process relies on software somewhere, right? So that makes compliance a core business requirement, not just an IT thing. And think about it. The more software tools organizations use, and they're using more all the time, the greater their exposure becomes. That increased usage, it directly correlates with an increased risk of non-compliance. It mathematically makes sense.
And we're seeing the big vendors react to this, aren't we? They're not exactly sitting back. What's their approach looking like these days? Oh, absolutely. Companies like Microsoft, Oracle, Adobe, Autodesk, they've significantly, and I mean significantly, intensified their audit activities. We're seeing a particular focus on rapidly growing tech cities. Think places like Hyderabad, for instance. These are hubs of intense software usage, lots of innovation.
Which means lots of potential licensing complexity.
Exactly. And a single oversight there, or really anywhere, can lead straight to those steep penalties, plus the reputational damage, potential legal consequences. It gets serious fast.
Yeah.
And it's really worth repeating that that BSA statistic, BSA, the Software Alliance, found that a staggering 43% of software installed globally is unlicensed.
43%, wow.
Yeah, it costs companies billions every single year. That figure alone really underscores the scale of this problem for businesses everywhere.
Okay, so with that kind of risk just hanging in the air, what exactly is a software license compliance audit?
Yeah.
If that notice lands on your desk, what does it actually look like?
No. Right. So a software license compliance audit is essentially a formal review process. It's usually initiated by the software vendors themselves, or sometimes they hire a third-party agency to do it for them. And the main goal is pretty straightforward, really, to verify that an organization's actual software usage perfectly aligns with the licensing agreements they've signed.
Okay, verify usage against agreements. What are the sort of core objectives they're looking for?
Well, the core objectives are usually quite clear. First, they want to confirm you have proper software licensing for everything you're using. Simple as that. Second, they want to detect and resolve any unauthorized software installations you might have running somewhere. Third, ensure your license usage stays strictly within the contractual limits you agreed to, number of users, number of devices, that kind of thing. But interestingly, and this is often missed, if you handle it well, these audits can actually help identify opportunities for optimization, maybe find ways to save costs.
Ah, so a potential silver lining, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. A hidden benefit many don't realize is there.
And what usually triggers these audits? Does it just happen randomly, or are there, specific things that might put you on their radar?
It's rarely a complete bolt from the blue, although sometimes it feels that way. Common triggers include things like rapid expansion or a significant increase in how much software you're deploying. Big infrastructure changes like major acquisitions or mergers, those are almost always flags.
Right, because licensing often gets messy during integration.
Exactly. And sometimes it might be suspicious activity that the vendor flags through their own systems. Or honestly, it could just be routine checks they conduct periodically, maybe based on industry trends or their own internal algorithms.
Okay.
So if we sort of connect this to the bigger picture, understanding these triggers, that's really the first step towards being proactive about compliance. Knowing what might set off an alarm lets you prepare long before any official notice actually arrives on your desk.
Okay, this next part feels really important, especially for anyone looking to save money and avoid hassle.
Mhm.
How do you proactively prepare? How do you make sure it's a smooth process and avoid those big penalties? That's the goal.
Right, absolutely. That's the key. Being truly audit ready can make all the difference. It really can transform what could be a crisis into just a manageable process. It's about building a robust kind of ongoing system, not just, scrambling when an audit letter shows up.
Right. Okay. So let's maybe unpack that. What should be on like a software audit preparation checklist? Where do you start?
Okay, good question. We always recommend starting by inventorying all your software assets thoroughly. This usually means using specialized tools, things like Flexera, Snow Software, maybe Landsweeper, to create a complete and crucially accurate map of every single piece of software installed across your organization.
Got it. Know what you have first.
Precisely. And once you know what you have, the next critical step is organizing all your license documentation. This is non-negotiable, really. You need to maintain centralized, easily accessible records of all your license agreements, your purchase invoices, the end-user license agreements, the EULAs, everything.
Right. Centralized and accessible.
Yeah. And beyond the paperwork, it's really vital to assign a compliance lead. You need to designate someone specific within your organization who is clearly responsible for coordinating any audit responses and just managing ongoing compliance efforts day to day.
Makes sense. A point person.
Exactly. Then don't forget to actually review the vendor-specific terms. This is huge. You need to understand exactly how licenses work for your key vendors. Is it Microsoft's client access licenses? Their CALs? They often dictate user or device access to servers.
Those CLs can be tricky.
They can be. Or maybe it's Oracle's models, which are famously complex. Or Adobe's subscription terms. Each vendor has its own unique rules and nuances. You have to know them.
Okay, so vendor specifics are key. What else?
Another really powerful step is to conduct periodic self-audits. Your own internal reviews. These are your best friend, honestly. They help you detect potential violations and fix them before an external auditor ever comes knocking.
Find the problems yourself first.
Exactly. And finally, enforce clear usage policies. This helps prevent those unauthorized software installations, what people often call shadow IT.
Right, where employees just download things themselves.
Yeah. You need clear guidelines and controls in place for everyone in the organization about what they can and can't install or use.
Okay, that's a pretty comprehensive checklist.
It is. And doing that proactive compliance planning thoroughly, it genuinely can save your organization time, a lot of stress, and most importantly, significant financial resources in the long run.
That all sounds like, quite a bit of work, honestly.
Mhm.
So, from your perspective, what's the real value in maybe bringing in an outside consultant versus trying to manage all of this internally? Is it worth it?
That's a fair question. While internal efforts are absolutely vital, working with an experienced compliance consultant can offer multiple strategic benefits. Especially, say, in a dynamic tech hub like Hyderabad we mentioned earlier, they just bring a level of specialized expertise that's, frankly, incredibly hard to replicate fully in-house, particularly when you're facing really complex vendor demands or specific audit protocols.
Okay, so expertise is one thing. What are the other key advantages?
Well, the advantages are pretty clear. First, as you said, deep audit expertise. They know how to navigate those complex licensing models, the specific audit protocols, with ease. Second, they're often excellent for cost optimization. They can pinpoint and help you eliminate unused or underutilized software licenses, which often leads to quite substantial savings.
So not just compliance, but actual savings too.
Definitely. Third, they provide regulatory protection. They help ensure you're fully compliant with all the relevant legal and vendor-specific rules. Fourth, they enhance your overall audit preparedness. Having their professional oversight significantly reduces your risk and the potential disruption an audit can cause. And ultimately, I think this is key. It allows your internal team to stay focused on your core business operations while the experts handle the nitty-gritty of the audit process.
Frees up internal resources, basically.
Exactly. Let your people do what they do best.
And you mentioned Hyderabad. I know there are some firms there that really specialize in this, like Shieldbyte InfoSec. They're known for their software asset management, their SAM expertise.
Yes, SAM is crucial managing and optimizing all those software assets.
Right. And Altasys Technologies, they seem to do more customized solutions, especially if you have a lot of software. Talent Pro India offers services with more of a legal backing. And BPK Corporate Consultant sounds interesting because they integrate the accounting side with IT compliance.
Yeah, there are specialists out there. And this kind of brings up an important question, doesn't it? How does that expert-led support enhance not just your compliance posture, but maybe your overall operational efficiency. Because it's really about optimizing your resources, isn't it? Not just avoiding fines. When you centralize software management, when you truly understand usage, you're essentially building this real-time digital asset inventory. And that unlocks opportunities for proactive cost reduction. It can dramatically streamline how IT provisions software, and it fundamentally strengthens your security posture just by eliminating unknown or unauthorized software running on your network.
So it becomes a broader operational benefit.
Precisely.
Okay, we've talked a lot about preparing, which is great. But what about the flip side? What are the common mistakes? From your experience, what's maybe the single biggest pitfall companies stumble into during an audit? And how can listeners maybe spot that risk in their own setup?
The single biggest pitfall. It's actually surprisingly simple. It's often in action. Just ignoring vendor notifications or formal audit requests. That is almost always a sure way to escalate the problem and guarantee a worse outcome. It signals you're not taking it seriously.
So sticking your head in the sand is the worst move.
Absolutely. Another major trap is lacking that centralized and updated documentation we talked about. If you can't quickly lay your hands on your licenses, your proof of purchase, you're immediately on the back foot in any audit discussion.
Right. You look unprepared or worse.
Exactly. Other common mistakes, definitely misunderstanding open source license terms. People think open source means free for all, but those licenses have specific, often complex compliance requirements that are frequently overlooked.
That's a good point. Easy to miss.
Very easy. Also, permitting unauthorized software installations that shadow IT again, where employees just download and use tools without any official oversight or vetting. Huge risk.
Yeah, that seems like a constant battle for IT departments.
It is. And finally, just inadequate tracking of software usage across all your users and devices. This can easily lead to significant over-licensing, which wastes money, or under-licensing, which is a compliance failure. Both are costly problems.
That point about awareness really stands out. Audit readiness really starts with just being aware of these pitfalls. Makes me wonder, though, are there any sort of counterintuitive policies or maybe training approaches you've seen that actually work well, that really stick with teams and help prevent that shadow IT? Because, like you said, it sounds like you almost need a software detective on staff.
Haha, yeah, it can feel that way. But actually, the best approaches I've seen are less about policing, less about being a detective, and more about making compliant software access easier for employees than the non-compliant alternatives. So things like providing really accessible, pre-approved software portals, having quick, streamlined approval processes for new tools people need for their jobs. Basically, when it's simpler and faster to do things the right way through official channels, most people will choose that path.
Reduce the friction for the right way.
Exactly. Education is definitely key, making sure people understand the why behind the policies. But ease of use for compliant options is just as critical, if not more so.
That makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Okay, let's maybe look at a concrete example now.
Yeah.
Something that really illustrates the power of getting this right, of that proactive planning. You mentioned a case study from a Hyderabad tech startup.
Yes, a really good example. So the challenge for this particular fast-growing AI startup located right in Tech City was pretty significant. They were hit with a sudden audit request from a major software vendor. And, typical fast growth scenario. Their records were scattered. They were using a whole complex array of different development tools. And with that rapid growth, they were at a very, very high risk of being found non-compliant and facing potentially massive penalties.
Okay, so a tricky spot. What did they do?
Well, their approach was smart. They didn't try to handle it alone. They immediately partnered with ShieldByte InfoSec, one of those expert firms we mentioned earlier. ShieldByte came in and helped them do a couple of key things quickly. First, a thorough pre-audit software and license inventory. Get the facts straight. Second, they identified where the problems were, both over deployments, meaning they had licenses they weren't using, and unauthorized tools they shouldn't have had. And third, crucially, ShieldByte helped them negotiate with the vendor. They actually managed to get some extended time for remediation, allowing the startup to fix the issues properly before the final audit assessment.
So buying some breathing room.
Exactly, which was vital.
And what was the outcome in the end?
The outcome was incredibly positive for them. First off, they completely avoided penalties that were estimated to be worth over 20 lakh. A huge potential cost averted.
Wow, okay, that alone makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely. But beyond just avoiding the fine, they actually reduced their ongoing software spending by an impressive 35%. That came from